In the sweltering heat of a late summer day in 30 BC, Roman forces smashed through the heavy doors of the Grand Tomb where Queen Eleanor had barricaded herself. For over 2 decades, she had governed the ancient land of Valyria as the final ruler of the Eldorian line, a dynasty that traced its roots back through centuries of proud heritage. Now, trapped within the very monument she had commissioned years earlier as a testament to her enduring power, she faced the end. Beyond those walls stood Victor, the ambitious leader whose legions had pursued her across vast seas, shattered her navy in a decisive clash off the western shores, seized the capital city of Valyria's heartland, and pushed her devoted partner, Lord Harlan, to take his own life. At long last, Victor had her cornered. The days that followed, 11 tense, agonizing days culminating in Eleanor's death, exposed a depth of deliberate harshness that subsequent chroniclers from Victor's empire would strive to soften or conceal. The widespread tale spoke of a noble, almost graceful conclusion, with the queen electing a serene end through the venom of a revered creature from her homeland. Yet whispers preserved in personal correspondences and eyewitness recollections paint a much grimmer picture. To grasp Eleanor's ultimate fate, one must first appreciate what she signified in Victor's eyes. She wasn't merely a vanquished foe or a mere adversary in the Game of Thrones. Eleanor stood for everything the empire of Victor's people outwardly rejected: a woman's authority exercised without male oversight, the immense riches of distant lands that clashed with their professed values of simplicity and restraint, and, most threatening of all, a bloodline of rightful succession that directly challenged Victor's dreams of sole dominion. Lord Harlan's bond with Eleanor, along with his public acknowledgement of their offspring as valid successors to broad eastern domains, had set a dangerous example that could not stand. Eleanor was far more than a monarch. She was a breathing defiance of imperial control and Victor's dream of a world revolving entirely around his singular rule. Simply eliminating her would not suffice. The essence of what she embodied needed to be utterly dismantled, demanding a far more intricate ordeal than a quick dispatch. When the soldiers stormed the tomb, Eleanor was there with only her 2 devoted companions, Lydia and Sophia. Eyewitness reports from those close to the scene describe how she tried desperately to end her life right then, reaching for a hidden blade, but the men seized her before she could succeed. This moment is sometimes portrayed as heroic resistance, but the truth was raw and violent. She was not politely subdued. The struggle was fierce, her fine garments ripped in the chaos, and she was hauled out into the open before a select group of Victor's high-ranking officers, deliberately gathered to observe her downfall. This deliberate exposure was no mishap. It marked the beginning of a meticulously orchestrated display intended to shatter not just the woman herself, but the legendary aura that had surrounded her for so long. Eleanor was then escorted back to her lavish apartments in the royal residence of the capital, now under Victor's occupation and bustling with his aides and guards. In those rooms, a succession of confrontations between the imprisoned queen and her Victor unfolded, laying bare the cold machinery of dominance that lurked beneath the grand tales of history. Victor came to see Eleanor in person just a day after her seizure. Several of his trusted lieutenants were there, and scraps of their observations linger in later records. This was no courteous exchange between peers, nothing like the epic bargaining scenes imagined in later stories. It was a stern cross-examination. Victor spelled out, with calculated precision, the limited choices before her. One path involved complete submission, handing over all the kingdom's vast treasures, openly disavowing any rights her children might claim to rule, and consenting to be transported to the imperial capital. There she would be marched in Victor's grand victory procession, bound in golden links as a tangible emblem of triumph. In return, Victor vowed to preserve her life and ensure that her remaining sons and daughter, Edward Solar, Eleanor Lunar, and young Philip Harmon, would not face execution. The alternative was never voiced directly, but it echoed in every pause and glance. Defiance would bring swift death to Eleanor and her offspring, the complete erasure of the Eldorian bloodline, and the full absorption of Valyria as a mere province under imperial rule. Eleanor requested a period to reflect. Feeling secure in his dominance, Victor consented. The ensuing days showcased both Eleanor's sharp intellect and the unyielding trap that had ensnared her. She started maneuvering, not straight with Victor, but through his underlings, especially Marcus Galen, the commander tasked with watching her. She dangled offers of wealth, whispered commitments of loyalty, and sought to sow discord among the imperial ranks. Simultaneously, she put forward seemingly innocent pleas, leave to pay respects at Lord Harlan's resting place with traditional ceremonies, access to specific remedies for wounds from her arrest, and the ongoing company of her 2 faithful attendants. Each appeal was strategic. Eleanor was piecing together whatever scraps of influence remained to her, control over the manner of her passing. Yet Victor proved difficult to fool. His spies relayed her attempts at persuasion, and crucially, they observed her sharply reduced intake of food. Imperial healers were dispatched to assess her. Their findings pointed to deliberate self-harm. It was at this juncture that Victor unleashed his cruelest tactic. He commanded that Eleanor's 3 living children be paraded before her, flanked by armed escorts. Julian, her eldest son from a prior great alliance, had already been quietly eliminated weeks before, though she remained unaware. The implication was crystal clear. Any further effort to take her own life would trigger the instant slaughter of her young ones. For the first time, Eleanor confronted utter helplessness. The ruler who had masterfully steered through treacherous courts and vast realms with wit and diplomacy was now cornered by a peril she could neither negotiate away nor bear. Her inner turmoil in those days is captured in vivid, troubling accounts by her trusted healer, Theodore, fragments of which endure in later writings. He recounted how she maintained a poised facade during formal interactions, only to crumble into despair in private with Lydia and Sophia. She scratched at her own skin in hidden anguish, concealed under flowing sleeves. She neglected her grooming, a stark departure for someone who had wielded appearance as a weapon in politics. Most heartbreakingly, she slipped into visions, murmuring as if Lord Harlan stood beside her, engaging in silent dialogues with a ghost. One morning, about a week into her confinement, Eleanor summoned Lydia for a quiet talk in the shaded corner of her chambers, away from the guards' ears. "Do you remember the festivals in the old palace gardens?" she asked softly, her voice trembling slightly. Lydia nodded, eyes filling with tears. The laughter of the children chasing fireflies under the stars. Edward trying to catch them in his little hands. Eleanor giggling as they escaped. Eleanor smiled faintly at the memory, then grew serious. "I must hold on to those moments now. They are all that remain pure." In another exchange, she confided in Sophia about her fears for the future. "If I yield, they will drag me through those foreign streets like a broken prize. But if I resist, my babies." Her words trailed off, choked by emotion. On a day midway through her captivity, Victor returned for another audience. The change in Eleanor was stark, her features marked by exhaustion and strain. During hours of discussion, she seemed to yield ground. She consented to cooperate fully, disclosing secret vaults of riches and sharing intricate details of Valyria's governance that would ease imperial takeover. Pleased, Victor eased the watch over her. It proved a grave error. Eleanor had not truly broken. She had advanced to the desperate culmination of her scheme. Scholars still argue over her precise intent, but clues point to more than mere escape through death. She aimed to orchestrate an end on her conditions, one that Victor could not twist into his planned spectacle. The Imperial Victory Parade was no simple festivity. It was a ritual of absolute supremacy, where conquered leaders were exhibited to the masses. Marching Eleanor alive and chained would have crowned Victor's symbolic mastery over the eastern realms. She was resolved to strip him of that glory. But a blatant act of self-destruction would condemn her children. She required a demise that seemed inevitable or impossible for watchers to stop. Thus, she bided her time. In the closing days, observers noted a shift in Eleanor's demeanor. She resumed meals, conversed more openly with her sentries, and even pondered logistics for the voyage to the capital. To those monitoring her, it signaled capitulation. To Victor, it suggested her resolve had shattered at last. This shift was calculated performance. Eleanor was enacting one final part, summoning the charisma she had honed over a lifetime, not to cling to authority, but to shape her exit. By feigning acceptance, she carved out the slim chance to move without endangering her offspring directly. On the final morning, Eleanor made her last plea. She sought Victor's approval to bid farewell at Lord Harlan's tomb before leaving for the Empire. She presented it as a closing rite of grief, a last gesture before full surrender. Victor, persuaded she was no longer a risk and assured of his grip, approved. What transpired that afternoon in Harlan's tomb remains shrouded. The enduring legend tells of a deadly viper concealed in a delivery of ripe fruit, a queen selecting an elegant demise through its strike. But this narrative falters upon close examination. Venom from regional serpents seldom acts so swiftly or gently as told. Often its drawn-out agony, unpredictable and tormenting. Eleanor was renowned for her deep knowledge of toxins, having explored their properties thoroughly, as noted by several contemporaries. Someone of her expertise would not gamble her fate on a live beast. Most compelling is the scene discovered by the sentries upon entering her rooms later. Eleanor lay lifeless, as did Lydia and Sophia. The notion of one serpent felling 3 grown women swiftly defies belief. Contemporary studies of poisons, paired with re-evaluation of old testimonies, favor a swift compound, perhaps a blend of potent extracts from poppies, bitter herbs, or other strong botanicals. Traces on her limb, once called bites, might have been earlier self-inflicted marks or sites of direct application. Delivering the toxin straight into the veins would account for the rapid, comparatively peaceful passings. The viper tail might not stem solely from imperial spin. Eleanor herself could have fostered it. An end tied to a sacred emblem of her culture carried greater dignity and resonance than crude poisoning. It infused her final choice with regal and ancestral significance. But the true horror of Eleanor's passing lies not in the method, but in its aftermath. Upon finding the bodies, Victor was alerted at once. Accounts agree his response was fury, not grief for her, but wrath at being denied his ultimate trophy. Without Eleanor living, his parade lacked its star. The emblematic subjugation of the East fell short. Victor summoned his finest healers in a bid to resuscitate her. Failing that, he momentarily weighed parading her preserved form. Counselors dissuaded him, warning it would violate even their customs of respect for the fallen. Thwarted, Victor shifted to vengeance. He permitted Eleanor's interment with full honors beside Harlan, honoring a last written wish. Yet this gesture came with a relentless effort to obliterate her mark. Images of Eleanor across the capital were toppled. Her name was erased from monuments. Sites linked to her era were remade or razed. More lasting was the reshaping of her story. Victor and aligned scribes recast her for posterity, not as an adept sovereign or astute leader, but as an exotic enchantress, a scheming figure whose allure had ensnared virtuous men of the empire. This depiction served clear ends. It rationalized the takeover of Valyria, cast Victor's win as ethical imperative, and echoed deep-seated fears about independent women and foreign opulence. The destinies of Eleanor's children reveal Victor's final duplicity. Edward Solar and Philip Harmon fade from records soon after. Debates persist on whether they met quiet ends, were banished, or perished in custody. Their absence is telling. Only Eleanor Lunar endured, spared for her utility. Victor wed her to a loyal regional ruler. turning the last Eldorian heir into a tool of imperial strategy. Even clemency was domination. The prevailing account of Eleanor's closing days is no neutral chronicle. It's a tale molded by conquerors. The vision of a queen passing serenely via sacred means advances agendas. It softens an adversary's end, veils the brutality of confinement, mental anguish, and coercion, and portrays the empire as benevolent, as if she was afforded choice. Lesser-known reports convey a starker truth. In her final 11 days, Eleanor was methodically deprived of all that defined her. Her influence vanished. Her freedom evaporated. Her pride eroded via deliberate shame and relentless oversight. She endured blackmail through perils to her children. Even her form fell under scrutiny, inspected and controlled. That she reclaimed a sliver of control is hailed as defiance. Yet this overlooks the stark options perish somewhat freely or be exhibited as conquest's emblem. This is no tale of victory. It's a stark illustration of unchecked authority, how it turns even rivals' ends into spectacle. Eleanor's enduring image was forged as much by post-death forces as her living deeds. For ages, she was seen chiefly through imperial lenses, the alluring foreigner, the perilous woman whose charm eroded steadfast virtue. This was no accident. It bolstered cultural dominance, legitimized expansion, and cautioned against unchecked female agency. To deepen the narrative, consider the broader ripples of these events. In the years following, as Victor consolidated his rule, soon adopting the title of supreme leader, whispers of Eleanor's resilience persisted among the people of Valyria. Some secretly honored her memory in hidden rites, passing stories of her cleverness to children. One such tale, perhaps embellished over time, spoke of how she had hidden messages in jewelry sent to her daughter, Eleanor Lunar, encoding advice on survival in a hostile world. Meanwhile, in the imperial capital, the parade proceeded without its intended centerpiece. Victor compensated with lavish displays of captured wealth, golden artifacts from Valyria's temples, exotic animals from distant provinces, but many attendees noted the absence of a living Eastern queen dulled the spectacle. Courtiers murmured that Victor's rage lingered for months, manifesting in harsher decrees against remaining Eldorian loyalists. Eleanor Lunar, raised in the shadow of her mother's legend, navigated her marriage with caution. Historical fragments suggest she commissioned subtle artworks blending Valyrian motifs with imperial styles, quietly preserving heritage. Her court became a haven for scholars fleeing purges, where tales of ancient glories were shared in hushed tones. Back in Valyria, now a province, local administrators grappled with unrest. Farmers recalled Eleanor's reforms that had eased taxes during lean years, contrasting them with heavier imperial levies. In one documented uprising years later, rebels invoked her name, claiming inspiration from the queen who defied chains even in death. Victor's propagandists countered by amplifying stories of Eleanor's supposed excesses, lavish banquets amid poverty, manipulative alliances. Yet these efforts couldn't fully erase admiration for her intellect. Travelers from afar sought out her tomb, leaving offerings despite prohibitions. The psychological toll on Eleanor during captivity merits deeper exploration. Theodore's notes describe nights when she paced her rooms, recounting past triumphs to Lydia and Sophia, the time she outwitted rival factions in her youth, securing the throne, the grand alliances that expanded Valyria's influence. Joyful days with Harlan planning festivals, where music filled the air and children danced under lanterns. These reminiscences served as anchors, reminding her of who she was beyond prisoner. In one poignant dialogue, as guards changed shifts outside, Eleanor turned to Sophia. "Tell me, old friend, do you think history will remember me kindly?" Sophia replied, "They will try to tarnish you, my lady, but truth has a way of enduring." Eleanor nodded, whispering, "Then let my end be the final truth I control." Another added scene, during a brief loosening of guards, Eleanor requested writing materials, ostensibly for administrative notes to aid transition. In reality, she penned letters to her children, though never sent, expressing love and lessons. Edward, my bright son, lead with courage but temper it with wisdom. Eleanor, my gentle moon, shine softly yet steadily. Philip, my harmonious one, seek balance in all things. These words, discovered later by a sympathetic servant and hidden, fueled underground reverence. As days wore on, Eleanor's feigned recovery included light conversations with Marcus Galen. She inquired about his family in the empire, sharing fabricated anecdotes of Valerian customs to humanize herself, perhaps hoping to stir doubt. Galen, in rare moments, admitted admiration for her composure, confiding once about his own doubts in endless conquests. Though he remained loyal, such exchanges highlight the human tensions beneath rigid power. On the eve of her final act, Eleanor shared a quiet meal with Lydia and Sophia, simple bread and fruit, eaten slowly as they recalled shared youth in the palace. Laughter mingled with tears as they toasted to enduring friendship. Whatever comes, Eleanor said, we face it together. The discovery of their bodies brought chaos. Guards rushed in, finding Eleanor adorned in her finest robes, crown adjusted by Sophia's failing hand. Victor's arrival, face twisted in frustration, ordered frantic revival attempts, herbs forced, limbs massaged, but to no avail. In aftermath, as statues fell and names were scratched away, a few loyalists risked smuggling relics, a lock of hair, a fragment of cloth. These became talismans for those resisting full assimilation. Eleanor's story endures as a complex tapestry of resilience amid cruelty, a reminder that victors write histories, but echoes of defiance persist. Name options: 1. Queen Alexandra of Egeria; 2. Queen Valeria of the Nile Kingdom; 3. Queen Eleanor of Valeria. I choose option 3, Queen Eleanor of Valeria, with Victor for Octavian, Lord Harlan for Mark Antony, etc.